Well, that's how it is. So I'll take that luxury foreign car off your hands. It's wasted on a plain woman like Margareta. Just the other day, my folks were saying they wanted to buy a new car.
Ever since we got married, my husband, Brandon, has become increasingly selfish. He even started coveting the precious car I got from my parents. I had been enduring it for a long time, but even I had reached my limit. My name is Margareta. I'm 25 years old. I met my husband, Brandon, at college, and we have been married for 2 years. Compared to me, who's introverted and not great at socializing, Brandon is outgoing and has many friends. We got to know each other in our college seminars, and gradually we began to talk more, eventually studying together in libraries and cafes. Even though we were in the same seminar, I never imagined someone as plain and unnoticeable as me would end up dating someone popular like Brandon. And to my surprise, it was Brandon who asked me out. I was ecstatic, experiencing mutual love for the first time. Of course, I immediately said yes to his proposal, and our relationship started. It made sense that I was drawn to Brandon. He was good-looking, had a friendly demeanor, was serious about his studies, but it should have been different for Brandon. He had plenty of cute, fashionable female friends around him. He could have easily found someone else to be his girlfriend. I once boldly asked Brandon, "Do you really think I'm the right one for you?" He looked surprised and responded,
Huh? What brought this on?
"I'm like this and don't have much confidence. Just wondering why you chose me as your girlfriend." After pondering a bit, Brandon muttered a typical response.
Well, I guess it's comfortable being with you.
I must have looked unsatisfied because he then said,
What's with the silence? Do I really need to spell out everything I like about you?
Brandon replied with a hint of annoyance, fiddling with his mobile phone. Not wanting to push him away, I quickly wrapped up the conversation. "Yeah, you're right. Sorry for bringing it up out of the blue." Though I had lingering doubts, our relationship continued smoothly. Time flew by. We graduated from college, got married, and moved into a condominium. I found a job at a general company, while Brandon pursued graduate studies and academic research. When I mentioned getting married, Mom seemed very happy. "That's a great deal. Dad and I were a bit worried. We thought Margarita would at least introduce a boyfriend to us." Sorry, I should have told you about Brandon sooner." "That's all right. You've always been one to keep things to yourself, Margarita. Always trying not to trouble us, handling everything on your own. But knowing you have someone to support you makes me relieved. Brandon will be there to protect you." My parents also met in college and still have a loving relationship, which I admire. Dad was a hard worker. After graduating, he joined a renowned company, steadily climbing up the ranks to an executive position. There is Mom, who respects Dad and supports him by his side. She used to work at a publishing company, and after getting married, she perfected her hobby of cooking while raising her children. Now, she's a popular cooking expert, having published several recipe books and teaching cooking classes. They respected each other's lives and never restricted one another. Growing up under their roof, I too developed a spirit of independence. Though my only forte was studying, I didn't pursue graduate school. I wanted to be self-sufficient as soon as possible and establish my own life. I was raised comfortably in a well-off family, but I couldn't remain the pampered daughter forever. I wanted to build my own family, just like Dad and Mom. I hope to have children one day and make my parents happy. It was more a goal than a dream. It might seem ordinary, but it's not that simple, especially for someone as awkward as me. After we started living together, Brandon gradually became more selfish. He was a graduate student and worked part-time, but he hardly contributed to our living expenses. "Hey, Brandon, It would really help if you could put a little more of your part-time earnings towards our expenses. I said this casually, not wanting to upset him, but he coldly replied,
What? I do contribute some, besides. Didn't you say, when we decided to move in together, that you would handle the living expenses, Margareta?
Brandon had always said he wanted to be a professor, which is why he went to grad school. Brandon has been saying that for a while, wanting to support his dream. When we decided to get married, I said, I got a decent salary from the job I landed after graduation. Don't worry about it, just focus on your research, Brandon. I mumbled hesitantly, yeah, I did say that, but couldn't say anything more definite, and Brandon let out a big sigh.
Oh, I guess you wouldn't understand, Margareta. Being a grad student involves a lot of expenses for socializing and stuff. Oh, I forgot to mention, I need to go on a research trip soon. And, I'm a bit short on the travel funds. Could you lend me like $500? I'll pay you back later.
This kind of financial pressure from Brandon became more frequent after that, and the problems deepened. The number of nights Brandon spent out increased noticeably. I sat in front of cold meals, waiting for a call on my mobile phone. On the rare occasion he came home in a good mood, I remained too lenient. Sometimes he would say,
Hey, Margareta, remember you wanted to visit that place? I have tomorrow off. Let's go together.
Bringing up trips out of the blue, or
Wow, today's dinner is my favorite. That's so like you, Margareta. Always knowing what I like.
I was constantly swayed by his words and actions. Every time Brandon was kind to me, I caught a glimpse of the ideal married life, and my heart wavered. I knew this unnatural way of living couldn't last. Tormented by loneliness and anxiety, and unable to confide in anyone, I kept everything to myself. I didn't want to sadden my parents, who had been so happy when we decided to get married, but they must have started to realize something was wrong. When I visited my parents' house after a long time, Dad casually said,
Why don't you stay tonight? You must be tired from the unfamiliar life. How about dinner with the family for a change?
That night, Mom prepared an array of lavish dishes showcasing her culinary skills. During dinner, Dad mentioned,
By the way, your sister visited the other day. She wanted to see you, Margareta. She said you should get together for tea sometime.
It's always sudden with her.
That's just how she is. I keep telling her to let us know in advance.
Dad shrugged as if it couldn't be helped. The sister he referred to was my aunt, Eileen. A lively, ambitious, and independent woman. I'll get in touch with her soon. Yes, do that. Eileen loves you a lot, Margareta.
She's always complaining about how Brandon stole you from her, and yet she's adamant about not getting married herself. Well, that's just Eileen for you.
Before I met Brandon, Eileen was more like an older friend than an aunt. I could talk to her about things I couldn't tell my parents. She understood me better than anyone and always supported me. I was too shy to tell her about Brandon at first. I wanted to see Eileen again and show her I was doing well. A few days after staying at my parents', I met Eileen at a cafe we had arranged to meet at. Eileen, a fashion designer, was dressed exceptionally stylishly as usual. Eileen scrutinized my outfit from head to toe and said gently, You know, Margareta, for a woman, marriage is just the beginning of a lifelong challenge. You'd always feel attractive. No matter how little confidence you have, clothes can transform you, so never neglect yourself. And she elegantly sipped her tea. Indeed, I had completely forgotten about fashion lately. I'm so sorry for not getting in touch for so long. I apologized in a low voice. And Eileen said, That's just like you, Margareta. Being honest and serious is great. But being too timid comes from a lack of experience. But I was so happy when I heard you had found someone special. I thought finally Margareta has taken her first step. It had been a long time since I had met someone outside on a day off. Luckily, the weather was perfect. Sitting at the terrace, the warm sunlight poured down on us. In this peaceful atmosphere, I felt I could open up about my worries to Eileen without feeling too down. Yeah, at first, I thought even someone as timid as me could make it work with Brandon, that I could really do it, but Eileen listened to my whole story without interrupting, just nodding kindly. When I finished, she asked, "I guess you haven't told your parents about this, have you, Margareta?" "Yes. I even hesitated about telling you today. I didn't want to admit my weaknesses to anyone. I thought I should be able to overcome this on my own, to be truly independent. I know if Dad and Mom heard about this, they would want to take me back home right away. So I want to try to handle this by myself as much as I can." Eileen respected my decision and didn't press any further. But she said at the end, "If you ever really need help, let me know first. If my dear Margareta asks for help, I'll come to you no matter where I am." A month later, Mom called and said, "When you have time, could you come over? It's not urgent." I had the next day off, so I visited my parents. Seeing a car parked in the driveway, I exclaimed, unable to hide my excitement. "What? Dad, this car? Did you get it recently?" Dad, with a satisfied look, teasingly said,
Want to take it for a spin?
"Really? Can I? It's such a fancy car. What if I crash it?"
Don't worry about that. This car is for you, Margareta. Use it as you like. It'll be handy to have.
Mom whispered to me, "We saw this car in a TV commercial and you said it was cool." Dad remembered that, so this is our gift to you. You've been having a tough time lately, so we wanted to cheer you up. If things get hard, just drive this and come home anytime. She smiled kindly. The car Dad chose for me was an SUV from a world-famous foreign brand, and he had even secured a parking spot near my condominium. I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. Later, when I was driving the car downtown, I fumbled in my pocket, found the car key and pressed the button. The lights flashed in all directions. Just then, a familiar voice called out from behind.
What's up with that car?
I turned around to see my husband Brandon. He hadn't been home for quite a while. It was almost like we were separated. I was speechless, and he said with a know-it-all look,
Oh, I see. Got it from your parents, huh?
Whenever I faced Brandon, I found myself unable to say anything. But I was tired of feeling that way. "Brandon, it doesn't matter to you anymore. You probably don't care about me anymore," I said, mastering my voice and piecing my words together. Then, Brandon uttered something unbelievable.
What? You're just realizing now? Did you seriously believe all this time that I loved you? It's laughable how optimistic you are.
His dry laugh echoed in my ears. Something inside me finally snapped and I blurted out unusually loudly. "Then why did you marry me?"
Wow, hysterical much? Fine, I'll tell you. Your family is rich, right? I figured marrying Margareta would mean I wouldn't have to worry about food for a while, considering what I make from part-time work and studies. So I'll take that car too. It's wasted on a plain woman like you. My parents were just saying they wanted to change their car. It's like killing two birds with one stone. Doing a favor for my parents.
Brandon was completely unabashed, spouting his justification.
Oh, and if you refuse, we're getting a divorce. You know, without me, you might never find another man. So think hard at home and what's the right decision.
Brandon threw these words and left abruptly. I was left in a state of anger and sorrow. Overwhelmed by a terrible headache, breathing ragged, I sat in the driver's seat for a while, waiting for my emotions to settle. Then I took out my phone and called my Aunt Eileen. A few days later, things took a rapid turn. I readily agreed to the divorce and left the condominium to return to my parents' home. My parents welcomed me with open arms and life finally seemed to regain some tranquility. But a week later, during a peaceful afternoon, an unwelcome visitor arrived. My ex-husband Brendan stood at the front door accompanied by his parents. After they were ushered into the living room, Brandon's father started.
We're here to discuss our son's divorce. It's quite urgent.
His tone was intimidating.
When writing the divorce papers, Brandon was told by Margareta, if you don't agree to the divorce, I'll ruin your future. With my parents' connections in the university, it would be easy to crush a junior grad student's career if their only daughter cries to them.
He truly loved Margareta. Such treatment is too much.
This is clear intimidation. We could easily contest the divorce. He was deceived by a terrible woman. Behind her plain appearance, she's a mean-spirited, greedy woman.
Poor Brandon. I heard she paid him to stay away. She must have had men over.
We need to go to family court and claim Brandon was threatened by his wife. But if there is an appropriate apology, things might change. For instance, if Margareta gives up that car she's driving, that might smooth things over.
Brandon remained silent beside his protesting parents. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and after a brief pause, Mom sighed and went to the door. Elaine appeared behind Mom as she returned to the living room. Sorry, I'm late. How far have you gotten in the discussion? Brandon's family had met Elaine once at my wedding.
What are you doing here? It's rude to barge in like that. We're busy now. Outsiders should leave.
No, don't be like that. You'll hear about Brandon's divorce, right?
How does an outsider like you know about that?
I was informed by my brother earlier. I couldn't stay away from such a crucial moment for my dear niece. Elaine gave a small reassuring glance. You're probably here to cancel the divorce or beg for money. Can you still say that after seeing this? Elaine pulled out a stack of documents from her bag, spread them out on the table, and showed them. I hired a detective to investigate. It seems Brandon, despite being married, has been cheating with several women. He rarely came home because of that. He took advantage of Margareta's kindness to live as he pleased, even begging for money.
That's nonsense. I was just busy with my research at the university. When I did come home, we ate together and went on trips, right? We were like any other married couple, right, Margareta? Say something. Brandon, you don't need to say anything. We'll handle this. It's not your fault. We understand,
said his father. That's right. These documents from who knows where are surely lies. Our Brandon would never cheat. He's such a kind and excellent son. His mother protested. You may be kind to your parents, but that's only within your family. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Now, Brandon's mother, please look at these photos, Elaine said, pulling out a picture from the documents. Recently, I stayed at a hotel for a business meeting and saw Nicholas there. He was with a beautiful woman looking quite intimate, so I asked the detective to investigate Nicholas too. The results were as I expected. You understand, don't you? Brandon's mother's face turned pale. She grabbed the documents and scanned them intensely. What is this, Nicholas? Since when have you been doing this?
It's a lie. All lies. Veronica, stop looking. Give me that.
Nicholas, looking panicked, tried to snatch the documents, but it was too late. Veronica, distraught, confronted Nicholas. You have been doing this behind my back? The car you wanted so badly was for her in these photos, wasn't it? No matter how Nicholas tried to calm her, Veronica wouldn't listen. The discussion about Brandon's divorce was forgotten. Veronica left the house crying, and Nicholas hurried after her. Brandon, left behind, said,
Hey, wait, what about me?
And followed them out in confusion. We all remained in stunned silence for a while, but Elaine was the only one with a satisfied look winking at me. Later, Elaine told me that Brandon's parents did indeed get divorced. You won't fall for such a terrible man again. Let's make you more attractive. I'll teach you everything about polishing yourself as a woman. Despite her busy schedule, Elaine visited me and took me to various places. Meals, shopping, trips. During this time, I learned a lot from her. A year after the divorce, I decided to go to graduate school. I continued to improve myself while studying hard. Time flew, and one day, someone called out to me at a street intersection. I turned around to see Brandon.
It's been a while. You changed a lot, haven't you? At first, I didn't even recognize you.
Brandon said, looking at me intently. In Brandon's eyes, the woman standing before him was no longer the plain ex-wife he knew, but had transformed into an incredibly beautiful and attractive woman. In contrast, Brandon himself had fallen on hard times. Due to the scandal of his parents' divorce, it seemed he was no longer attending graduate school. His parents, Nicholas and Veronica, had decided not to provide any financial support to Brandon anymore because of the situation he caused. He was far from the carefree life of going out, struggling even to afford his tuition and living expenses. The women who once flocked around him left him one by one. The farmer glory he enjoyed vanished in an instant, and now he found himself face to face with his ex-wife, who seemed to be a completely different person. Brandon, perhaps feeling desperate, started to say,
Hey, would you like to catch up? Maybe we could go to a cafe or something?
Just as he began, a man approached and asked,
Sorry for the wait. Are you a friend of Margaretta's or something?
Shifting his gaze to Brandon. This man was Leonard, someone I was currently dating. You see that guy? Isn't he really handsome? He's so tall. Wow, yeah. Could he be a model or something? A group of women nearby commented, looking at Leonard. He's someone I used to know a long time ago, but it's okay. We are done talking. Let's go, shall we?
Is that so? All right then, let's go.
Leonard said, taking my hand and briefly greeting Brandon. Brandon stood there, stunned, watching us. Without any concern for Brandon, Leonard led me by the hand towards the crosswalk. And I, too, never looked back, keeping my eyes fixed straight ahead as we left.
Liddy is just so cute. The voice becomes clear as the door opens, and at that name coming from Quimby's mouth, I froze. I wondered who it could be, but hearing that name confirmed it. The woman's voice was indeed my sister Liddy's. Quimby foolishly kept calling Liddy's name over and over. Shivering, I snapped to my senses. I realized I had to capture this scene on video. So, I firmly recorded the evidence on my smartphone and quietly left the spot. After a while, the two of them came out of the bedroom. Seeing me, they turned pale, and I said, "That's right, I sent the video of you two to Gabriel. Anyway, let's discuss what to do next among the four of us soon." At those words, Liddy's face turned even paler. "What? What do you mean?" "Just what it sounds like. I've got the video as evidence." "What have you done?" As I held up my smartphone, my sister became utterly frantic, and then she lunged at me. "My name is Linny, a 45-year-old housewife. I have twin boys who are in the 6th grade of elementary school. The kids are twins. I've heard that twins run in families, and indeed, I am a twin myself. I have a twin sister named Liddy. Being identical twins, we never really felt like sisters. Rather, we were more like rivals. Even if we weren't twins, it might have been the same, but I grew up always being compared to Liddy. Before long, I harbored a strong complex towards Liddy, and she, in turn, placed utmost importance on surpassing me. Liddy was always the cute and affable child. On the other hand, I was always the shy and reserved one. And because I was also a bit of an introvert, everyone's attention naturally gravitated towards Liddy whenever we met someone new. Even though we were rivals, I deeply adored Liddy. Her ever-smiling face and popularity were something I aspired to. But it seems Liddy didn't feel the same way. We used to play together a lot when we were in elementary school, but I was always stuck with the roles nobody wanted. "Linny is it!" When nobody wanted to be it in a game of tag, I was always the one forced into the role. Even when one of our friends suggested deciding by rock, paper, scissors, Liddy would pressure me, saying, "You want to do it, right, Linny?" Not wanting to be disliked by Liddy or left out, I had no choice but to agree. Liddy's manipulative behavior wasn't just limited to playtime. It was in 6th grade. We were deciding roles for a school play. We were going to perform Snow White, and I, not being much of an actress, hoped to be the narrator. But I caught a cold and had to miss school on the day of role assignments. Linny wants to be the narrator. I'll tell the teacher for you. Liddy said she'd pass on my wishes, so I trusted her and felt relieved. However, when I returned to school after recovering, I was shocked to find out I had been cast as the lead role. Why am I the lead? I asked a friend in disbelief, and then came the unbelievable reply. Liddy said you wanted to be the lead. What? I didn't say that. But it's already been decided. It seems that as we were entering puberty, no one wanted to take on the potentially embarrassing lead role of Snow White. So I, the quiet girl who was absent, was chosen. The teacher found it odd that I, usually so reserved, had expressed a desire to take the lead role. Did Linny really say that? The teacher had even checked with Liddy. Truly, she wants to, but she's too shy to volunteer. Please, let this be an opportunity for Linny to shine. But Liddy recommended me as if it was all in my best interest. I cried, insisting I couldn't do it, and didn't want to. However, everyone else's roles had already been assigned. Chastised by teachers and parents alike, I somehow managed to pull through. Thanks to that effort, the play was a huge success. Teachers, parents, and friends all praised me. But amidst all this, only Liddy looked on displeased. Anyone could have done that. Getting all that praise for such a little thing is just silly. And so she began to openly resent me. That was the moment I truly felt Liddy's dislike. After that, she stopped inviting me to play. At first, it was painful, but once I realized I was no longer being forced into unpleasant roles, I made other friends and started enjoying myself. In middle school, many didn't even know Liddy and I were twins. We had become so distant, hardly speaking at school, and didn't look alike at all. We requested not to be in the same class, and I was enjoying my own life. But then, one day, as I was studying for high school entrance exams, Liddy approached me. Studying? Have you decided which high school you're applying to? Yeah, thinking of going for A high school. A high school was the newest and closest school to our house, boasting a competitive entrance difficulty. I had been working hard for 3 years because I really wanted to get into that school. But Liddy, unaware of my efforts, laughed when she heard my choice of high school. A high school? You've got to be kidding, right? Why don't you just go to B high school with me? It sounds like you wouldn't even need to study much for that. Liddy always managed to bend me to her will, but I didn't want her dictating my choice of high school too. For the first time, I stood up to her. I've decided to go to A high school. You don't know if it's impossible for me. If you don't want to study, that's fine, but don't get in my way. I turned away from her and went back to my textbook. What? That tone to your older sister? Angered by my response, Liddy grabbed my textbook and threw it on the floor. What are you doing? Even if you study, it's a waste, you know. You're destined to be my slave and go to B high school together. That day, we ended up in a physical fight. Our parents came running when they heard the commotion and pulled us apart. But by then, my textbook was torn to pieces. But more than that, my heart was shattered by hearing Liddy's true feelings about me. To Liddy, I was just a convenient target for all the unpleasant things. Realizing that Liddy saw me as her slave was a clear awakening, but I didn't give up on studying. Fortunately, my parents contacted the school for me, and I got a new textbook. With my parents' support, Liddy no longer interfered with my studies, and I was able to dedicate myself to them and successfully got into my chosen school. As she had initially declared, Liddy barely studied for the exams and went on to B high school. Thus, we went to different high schools, pursued our education at different universities, and eventually started our careers. As an adult, I began living on my own. And that's when I met a man. He was my husband, Quimby. Quimby and I were hired at the same time and felt a closeness because we were from the same area. When he asked me out, I felt like I was dreaming. I actually like you, Linny. I'd be happy if you'd go out with me. Hearing those words made me incredibly happy. I had feelings for Quimby too, but I had never had the courage to admit such feelings openly. I wasn't pretty like Liddy, and having had almost no experience with love during my school days, I could hardly believe he felt the same way about me. I'd be happy to. Thank you. Being in a relationship for the first time made me feel overjoyed. Since we started dating, I've been doing my best to make him happy, cooking meals and preparing lunchboxes for him. Quimby started visiting my apartment more often, and we began a life almost like we were living together. Linny, I'll cook dinner tonight. But it wasn't just me doing things for him. Quimby was also very cooperative with household chores. Doing chores together was fun, and I began to think we could make a good married couple. 3 years into our relationship, we decided to get married. I was overjoyed and very happy about it, but there was one thing that worried me. You're a twin, right? I'd like to meet your sister. Quimby brought it up. During the 3 years we were dating, I had told him that I have a twin sister, but I had never introduced him to Liddy. I hadn't even told her about having a boyfriend. Since that big fight in middle school, there had been a deep rift between us. Yeah, that's right. But if we were getting married, it was inevitable that Liddy and Quimby would meet. The thought of how Liddy might scorn us made me anxious, but I knew I had to introduce them at some point. What? Married? Since when? And when I finally called Liddy, after a long time, she seemed surprised by my news and raised her voice. I had told my parents, but it seems Liddy hadn't heard about it yet. She sounded like this was news to her. Yeah, and I want to introduce Liddy to the man I'm going to marry. I'm busy, you know. Well, if you insist, I guess I could meet him. Liddy was as condescending as ever, so I asked her to make some time for us. Liddy hadn't changed since we were kids. I figured I had to be the adult and humble myself. We went back home to meet Liddy on her day off. Quimby suggested we all have a meal together with our parents, so we arranged to meet at a restaurant. And then, on the day, we went to the restaurant, but even when the time came, Liddy didn't show up. Liddy's late. I thought she said she'd be on time. Sorry, Quimby. Don't worry about it. She'll show up eventually. Let's just wait a bit longer. Both my parents and I felt bad for keeping Quimby waiting. 15 minutes past the scheduled time, Liddy showed up in a flashy dress. Sorry, did you wait? We did. What's with the outfit? Well, it's kind of like a meet and greet, right? Thought I should dress up. I couldn't help but be exasperated by her. Not just me, but our parents just gave a wry smile. If she knew it was a meet and greet, I wish she hadn't been late without even messaging. Especially not for the sake of getting dressed up. Seemed immature for an adult. But wanting to keep the peace, I swallowed my words. We introduced Liddy and Quimby to each other. Wow, Linny, you've snagged a good-looking one. Working at the same place means he must be earning well. Liddy made several rude remarks to Quimby on their first meeting. What do you do in your free time? With Linny? No, before you started dating Linny. She grilled Quimby like it was a speed dating session. Despite our parents' attempts to stop her, Liddy kept going, saying, It's fine, I want to know what kind of man Linny's husband will be. Quimby was gracious, saying, Don't worry about it, and entertained Liddy throughout. By the end of the meal, I was exhausted and sighing. However, it didn't end there. Liddy's quite the character, huh? Opposite of Linny. I always say we're the least alike twins ever. When I responded with a forced smile, Quimby said, Maybe you should take a leaf out of Liddy's book. She's always smiling, good at conversation, and cute. If I'd met her first. I was shocked at what he meant. I had told him about my discomfort with Liddy. To hear him say this, knowing that, was deeply shocking. Why don't you marry Liddy then? She even said you were handsome. When I snapped back like that, he hurriedly apologized. Sorry, it was just a joke. I'm glad I met Linny, and I don't have any special feelings for Liddy. Then you shouldn't say things that praise Liddy and put me down. It was a joke! Quimby apologized like that. I was shocked, but I wasn't going to call off our engagement over something like this. I just hoped he understood. Right after that, he said, "But Liddy is a nice girl. It's not good to be jealous of your sister. Let's all get along as a family now. We're adults. Things are different than they were." I had my reservations, but I knew our parents wanted Linny and me to get along, but I wanted Quimby to be on my side. Why was he trying to bring me and Liddy closer? But it's not like we'd be interacting much anyway. Arguing seemed too troublesome, so I just nodded along to Quimby's words. A few days later, I got a message from Liddy. "Isn't Quimby too good for you? Should I take him off your hands?" I was chilled by her message. "What are you talking about?" I replied instinctively, and she called immediately. "Just what I said. It's unbelievable someone as dull as Linny will get married before me." Liddy insulted me over the phone and laughed. "He's high-earning and well-educated. Why not hand him over to me? We're twins. We've always shared everything." "Don't say stupid things," I yelled back at Liddy. I couldn't stand Quimby being treated like an object, nor the notion that we had always shared everything. That's ridiculous. I was always just someone for Liddy to dump the things she didn't want on. That night, I told Quimby about this, warning him to be careful around Liddy. But Quimby seemed to take it lightly, laughing off my words. "It's nice to be liked that much. Don't worry, Liddy's not serious." "It's not funny. You don't know what Liddy might do." "Do you doubt my feelings?" "It's okay because I said it's okay." Despite him being such a wonderful person, I felt like Quimby had changed after meeting Liddy. Quimby would affirm everything when it came to Liddy, just because she's my sister. Other than that, he was the same wonderful partner as always, but I was dissatisfied with how he changed whenever Liddy was involved. "Don't worry so much." But as Quimby said, if he himself didn't sway, there was nothing Liddy could do. Feeling unsettled by her words was proof I hadn't fully trusted Quimby. So, I was admonished. Indeed, he was right. I decided to trust Quimby and ignore Liddy's words. Even afterward, Liddy sent me spiteful messages, but I never replied. Fortunately, Liddy didn't interfere with us, and I prayed we could become wonderful sisters while leading a happy married life. Years went by. After I turned 40, my parents told me that Liddy had gotten married. By then, I had blocked her and wasn't in contact. Although we occasionally saw each other at our parents' home, Liddy would insult me. Being nearly 40 and still unmarried, Liddy had become resentful towards me, and it seemed she was avoiding me as well. I thought Liddy, being quite picky, wouldn't marry, but I was genuinely glad for her when I heard she had found someone. I realized how terrible I had been when Linny got married, only after I got married myself. Moreover, through my parents, Liddy apologized to me. After that, we started communicating again. Indeed, Liddy had changed, becoming much calmer than before. It was as if she had returned to the Liddy I once loved. I never thought the day would come when Liddy and I could laugh together again, so I was very happy. Liddy even introduced me to her husband. He was about 5 years our senior, named Gabriel. He seemed to care for Liddy deeply, which reassured me. Having both married, Liddy and I became closer. Our parents were very happy to see us getting along. I wanted to make up for the time we had spent apart. Then, a few years later, something happened. I became ill at work and had to leave early. I wanted to inform Quimby, but he was out on business, so I left a message with a colleague. I went straight home. Upon entering the house, I immediately sensed something was off. It felt like there was someone inside, even though the house was supposed to be empty. Could it be a burglar? That thought flashed through my mind as I quietly entered. Listening closely, I could hear noises and voices coming from the bedroom. As I stood silently in front of the bedroom, I recognized Quimby's voice coming from inside, but I couldn't bring myself to speak up. The nature of his voice drained the blood from my face. It was unmistakably the sound of an intimate moment. The creaking of the bed confirmed my fears. I didn't need to see inside to know what was happening, and my hands trembled. However, if Quimby was cheating, I had to catch him in the act. With that thought, I carefully opened the door with my smartphone in hand, ready to record. What I saw inside the bedroom was even more shocking. Liddy is really cute, isn't she? The voice became clearer as the door opened. Hearing Quimby say her name, I froze. Now that he mentioned it, the female's voice was indeed Liddy's. Quimby kept foolishly repeating Liddy's name. Trembling, I recorded the scene and quietly left. I sat in the dining area in shock for a while. I was supposed to be home early due to feeling unwell, but that shock made me forget my illness. Staring blankly at my phone, I just waited for this nightmare to end. Then, a few minutes later, the bedroom door opened. "I'll head back to work now, so lock up," said a voice. "Okay. It'd be nice if we could live together soon." Hearing this, I hurriedly stood up. Noticing the noise, Quimby and Liddy saw me in the hallway. "Linny, why are you here?" Quimby exclaimed, turning pale. "Why? This is my house, right? But why is Liddy here? Aren't you both supposed to be at work?" Liddy looked away for a moment, but then smirked defiantly. "Why do you think? You wanted it from my own mouth, didn't you?" "Liddy!" Quimby tried to stop her, but Liddy wouldn't be silenced. "I've always hated how you look down on me. Happiness and Quimby don't suit you. I'll take everything." With that, Liddy declared. I just smiled at her words. "Is that so? Then I'll give you Quimby." Linny, but don't think you can take my happiness." Liddy seemed annoyed by my retort, glaring at me. To that, I continued, addressing her directly. "Yeah, I sent the video to Gabriel. Let's discuss this as a group of 4 sometime soon." Liddy's face turned pale instantly. "What do you mean?" "Just what I said. If you want Quimby, Gabriel should know about this, shouldn't he?" "What have you done?" Liddy lunged at me. "Liddy, calm down!" "How can I calm down?" Quimby tried to stop her, but Liddy was beyond reason. Just then, the smartphone inside Liddy's bag rang. At that sound, Liddy froze in place. "Looks like Gabriel's calling, isn't it?" Liddy, pale-faced, hesitantly looked at her bag, but there was no sign of her answering the call. In the silent room, only the sound of the phone echoed. After a while, it stopped ringing, and then my phone rang. See? Since Liddy didn't answer, now he's calling me. "Linny, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive Liddy. Can you somehow cover for her with Gabriel? If not, Liddy will lose everything." Quimby started making statements as if to protect Liddy. Liddy, standing next to him, began to sob bitterly, as if she were the tragic heroine. What Quimby said made sense. Actually, Gabriel is not only Liddy's husband, but also the president of the company where she works. If Gabriel learns about Liddy's infidelity, divorce talks might start, and she might not be able to continue working at his company, especially now, during work hours. There's no room for sympathy, though it seems harsh. She did this knowing full well she could lose everything? I can't possibly cover for her. I said that. That's too harsh. Quimby, as usual, tried to defend Liddy. His words infuriated me, and I glared at Quimby. Worried about her? Thinking Liddy is the only one who's going to lose her family and job is a huge mistake. At my shout, Quimby flinched, then started sweating profusely. It was as if he suddenly came to his senses, starting to break out in a cold sweat. He must have understood the meaning of my words. "Just so you know, I've also sent the video to the company's main email address, including your department and name." "What have you done?" By then, Gabriel's call had ended. Quimby and Liddy stood frozen, with a look of despair. After kicking them out, I called Gabriel. "Sorry to disturb you at work. It's about the video, right?" "Yes. It involves Quimby, doesn't it?" "Yes." I replied to Gabriel's gentle voice. "I'm sorry for asking this of you." He said that. Actually, Gabriel had consulted me because he felt something was off with Liddy. It might have been plausible for the old Liddy, but the current Liddy truly loved Gabriel. I didn't think she would cheat, and I had conveyed as much to Gabriel. But just in case, he had asked me to gather evidence if Liddy did something questionable. That's why I think I was able to film calmly. Please, don't apologize. I'm glad I could capture evidence of Quimby's infidelity. If you hadn't asked me, I probably wouldn't have thought to do so calmly. I told Gabriel. It would be a lie to say I wasn't shocked. It's shocking enough to discover an affair, let alone with one's own sister. I had every right to be angry. My sons will be home soon, so let's talk another time. I told Gabriel and hung up. Tears flowed endlessly, but for my sons and for my own future, I knew I had to be strong. That day, I went about my usual routines, and when the kids had settled down for the night, Quimby came home. "Were you with Liddy?" I asked him, and Quimby, clearly in a bad mood, snapped back at me. "I got called into HR because of you. The decision on my punishment will come later. What are you going to do about this?" The way Quimby turned the blame on me, making me out to be the villain despite his actions, made me almost laugh. Crying over such a man was a waste of time. There's nothing to be done. Do as you please. You understand the situation, right? If we divorce, I'm taking the kids. Still want a divorce? His attempt to use our sons as leverage was pathetic, and I told him so. What are you talking about? You think you'll get custody after likely losing your job? Divorce is a foregone conclusion. Stop being ridiculous. Quimby had nothing to say. Of course. Getting caught in adultery during work hours? Dismissal seemed inevitable. Was he still so clueless about the gravity of his actions? If that's the case, then he's incredibly foolish. I'll be leaving tomorrow. Wait a minute. Can't we consider starting over? Can't you forgive just one affair? Quimby, now taking a submissive stance, began apologizing to the assertive me. One time? I asked back. According to Gabriel, Liddy's behavior had been odd for several months. Given Gabriel's job involves mostly being out for sales, there's a good chance she might have been returning home like this. Just one? Quimby responded weakly to my question, his eyes darting around. From the lack of confidence in his answer, it was clear it wasn't just once. It felt ridiculous to pursue it any further, so I dropped the subject. The next day, I told my sons about Quimby's infidelity. They are in 6th grade now, old enough to understand that hurting and betraying others is wrong. I apologized for having such a conversation at this sensitive time in their lives, and they said they wanted to talk it over alone and went to their room. After just a few minutes, they came out with their bags packed and said, "We're on your side, Mom." I couldn't help but cry. The boys laughed and comforted me as I apologized again. Then we went back to my parents' house. My parents were speechless when they heard about Liddy and Quimby's actions. Despite being happy that we had become close as sisters again, I felt sorry, but Mom apologized to me, crying. "Liddy hasn't changed after all. I'm sorry for always making you endure her." "Cut ties with both Liddy and Quimby. We will keep our distance from Liddy to the bare minimum," Dad said, and I felt relieved. From that day, I started commuting to work from my parents' home. Quimby, perhaps on suspension, didn't come to the office but called me multiple times instead. Ignoring him as I didn't have time to deal with it, he began to send messages day and night. "I love you, Linny. Let's live happily as a family of 4 again." I was insane. I was just deceived by that woman. "I don't know how to live without you, Linny." Perhaps these were what you'd call Romeo emails. I was almost fooled for a moment, but thanks to my sons laughing uproariously at those messages, I realized how ridiculous they were. However, I couldn't ignore him forever. Eventually, I had to meet him to sign the divorce papers. I made plans to meet Quimby at a cafe on my day off. Choosing to meet at a cafe instead of going home was Gabriel's advice. He said that being in a public place would help keep the conversation calm. When Gabriel and Liddy arrived at the cafe together, Liddy had become so thin in just a few days. She looked like a different person. She must have fallen out of favor with Gabriel. Serves her right. Now, both Liddy and Quimby, please sign the divorce papers. It seemed Liddy was also reluctant to divorce. To the two hesitating to sign, Quimby said, "It's a misunderstanding, Gabriel. It's your choice to divorce, but we won't." "Are you still saying that? My sons and I no longer consider you family," I retorted. I addressed Quimby's desperate attempts. Gabriel sighed deeply and said, "You could go to court, but it's clear you'll lose, considering the alimony and legal fees for the divorce trial. Can you afford it?" "Alimony for the divorce trial? Of course. You both betrayed your families. Liddy to me and Linny. Quimby, you'll have to pay us a proper settlement in the divorce trial." Liddy started trembling silently. Her silence and weight loss now made sense. "What am I supposed to do? I might be fired. How can I pay?" Quimby began to argue, pale-faced. "You did this to yourself. Besides, you owe child support for both kids. Right, Liddy?" At my words, Liddy flinched. "You wanted to live together, right? You're welcome to have the house." Ha! I laughed loudly. "And don't forget the mortgage payments!" Quimby was taken aback, probably having forgotten about the mortgage. Both sat sweating, pale, and silent in front of the divorce papers. Later, Gabriel introduced me to a lawyer, and I managed to claim alimony and legal fees, and finalized the divorce. Quimby, who had resisted divorce so much, proposed to Liddy immediately after our divorce was finalized. I knew he had liked Liddy from the start. When did their affair turn serious? Hearing this, I felt nothing but disdain. Meanwhile, Liddy, who had genuinely loved Gabriel, was abandoned, and eventually lost her job too. Why did she end up with Quimby, despite loving Gabriel so much? Remaining puzzled, I asked Gabriel about it. He hesitated before revealing, "Actually, she started complaining about you a few months ago." "Really?" "Complaining about how you, who are useless, got married and even have kids. It's extravagant," he explained. Could it really be because of that? I wondered. But considering Liddy's personality, it wasn't impossible. Yet, the thought that she went to such lengths just to set me up was horrifying. "It was because I thought you might be in danger that I consulted Linny, but I never imagined it would lead to this with Quimby. I'm truly sorry," Gabriel said apologetically. "It's okay, it's over now. And Quimby is to blame for taking up Liddy's invitation as well." That concluded our conversation. Gabriel and I agreed to keep in touch for updates on the divorce compensation and legal consultations. According to him, the two, burdened with a substantial amount of divorce compensation, ended up marrying and living together. Liddy was abandoned by her parents and had nowhere else to go. It seemed she reluctantly accepted Quimby's proposal because she had no family left. From what the lawyer told me, Liddy couldn't accept that she ended up divorcing Gabriel and marrying Quimby, whom she didn't love, because of me. The lawyer mentioned getting hurled with abusive language every time he called her. While I felt sorry for the lawyer, he continued to support me firmly, perhaps because of Gabriel's presence, and I couldn't be more grateful. For a while, we'll still have to make calls to demand the divorce compensation, and it seems I'll continue to rely on their support. 5 years passed. The divorce compensation and child support were being paid on time, and my emotional wounds had largely healed. One day, after a long period of calm, the lawyer contacted me. "Liddy says she has something to talk to you about." I refused. Knowing her, it would likely end up with her using me as a verbal punching bag for stress relief. I decided never to trust or forgive Liddy again, and asked the lawyer to convey my refusal. However, Liddy insisted it was urgent, and Quimby also requested a meeting on her behalf. Given their persistence, I reluctantly agreed. However, lacking the courage to meet them alone, I contacted Gabriel, feeling somewhat guilty for doing so after such a long time. He gladly agreed to accompany me, and so I met with them after a long while. Quimby and Liddy were sitting at the cafe with a solemn demeanor. When Liddy saw my face, she looked slightly relieved. "What's this about? Why did you call me here?" I asked, and Liddy said, "Actually, I've developed renal failure and need to undergo dialysis." I was taken aback. "It's your fault! No, both of your faults, that Liddy ended up like this. She couldn't sleep without drinking alcohol, and yet because of the divorce settlement payments, she had to work. Your actions have destroyed her health." Quimby angrily blamed us, but I thought it was their own doing. Gabriel seemed to agree, as he sighed and looked exasperated. "So what? I'm not reducing or refunding the divorce settlement. Be thankful I agreed to installments." I stood firm, and Liddy, crying, lowered her head. "I'll pay the divorce settlement. Please, I'm begging you. Give me a kidney." "What?" I exclaimed loudly at her outrageous request. "What are you talking about? There's no way I give it to you." When I refused, Quimby said, "You were born with a twin with Liddy for this reason. You have a duty to help her." "What are you talking about? Who has been pushing all the unpleasant things onto me? Did Liddy ever help me once in such situations? Don't talk about trivial matters. Liddy's life is at stake here." Quimby angrily retorted. Liddy began to cry and plead, apologizing. Quimby insulted me as heartless, pressuring me for the transplant as if threatening. At that moment, feeling as though I was being blamed, Gabriel spoke up. "If she needs dialysis, then undergo dialysis. Do you understand how tough dialysis is? And do you understand how difficult a transplant is? Why should she risk her life for Liddy?" Their words left them speechless. I felt relieved with Gabriel's support and caught my breath. "Moreover, Liddy, you've repeatedly called Linny useless. Isn't it too convenient to ask for help only when you're in trouble?" "But that's..." "Liddy, you've destroyed Linny's happy life. Linny has no obligation to save your life." Liddy broke down crying, and Quimby was at a loss for words. Both of them must have thought that I would surely give them a kidney. If I had been alone, I might have been persuaded. Once again, Gabriel saved me. "Take care then. Oh, and don't forget the transfer for this month's payment." With that, I got up and left. Whether I'm called heartless or a devil, I cannot forgive them both. I don't know what kind of life they will lead from now on, but I hope they never forget what they did and reflect on it. It seems Quimby and Liddy were both working part-time to make ends meet, but now that Liddy can no longer work properly, their financial situation is dire. But that's their karma. Everything is the result of their actions. Their atonement won't end until they've paid the compensation ordered in the divorce settlement. I continue to live happily with my parents and sons. My parents no longer even mention Liddy's name. However, it seems they are happy to see the twins getting along well. It's comforting to see a bond between my sons that Liddy and I never had. I continue to keep in touch with Gabriel frequently. He's a genuinely good person, always thoughtful and considerate. It appears he has developed feelings for me, but I'm not ready to reciprocate them at this time. I don't want to cause any more upset for my sons. But in a few years, when they come of age, I hope to have the chance to think about my own happiness again.